This is 5 by 5, a podcast from the Frontier Master Executive Council. 5 by 5, the podcast for the ALPA pilots of Frontier Airlines. We hear you loud and clear.
Welcome to 5 by 5. I'm Jason DeVerney, your host, and today we've gone outside of our MEC to discuss a few things from a really big picture sort of point of view. I have VP of Administration Secretary Sean Creed, I think most famously to our pilot group, known as the MEC chairman of Spirit when they went into their actual strike, which happened in 2011, I believe, Sean?
June 12th, 2010.
2010. Thank you for that correction. And then additionally, we have Jade. Frontier is part of ALPA Group B1. Jade is our Executive Vice President, and he's also the National Resource Coordinator. So Jade, thank you for joining us today as well.
Thank you for having me.
So I reached out to Jade a couple weeks ago to really just kind of do an educational podcast on structure. And the reason that Jade is so perfect to talk to is because he really did a lot of work on an upcoming ALPA product that really at this point, Jade, I'd love for you to kind of come in and explain what people can expect out of ALPA 301, I believe it's called. And then also who will be taking this and who is it available for?
ALPA 301 was a kind of deep dive into understanding what does ALPA provide. Not only the resources, the history, but where we came from, what we are, and where we're going forward. That's going to come out as ALPA's anniversary this July. So we're going to see it on their birthday later this month. You'll see the start of ALPA 301. It's a 6-part series. It's going to roll out one a month for the next 6 months later this year.
Thank you for all of that. I really want to dive in and focus on what is an LEC, what is an MEC, what is Joe Pilot's role in their pilot group? And Sean, it'd probably be a great time for you to come in and speak to this. Generally, can you speak to how a pilot should participate in the election process and help them understand the roles of their elected captains and FO roles?
Yeah. So I think that the better way to we'll walk through kind of a skeleton structure of how ALPA is built. In general, ALPA is built as a bottom-up organization. We hear that a lot, and people are like, yeah, sure, there's a president, yada, yada. No, it starts with the member. The member is the most important part of the calculus. And what do I mean by that? Because when the members participate, they attend LEC meetings, which is your local form of governance for your domicile. Frontier is much like Spirit. We have multiple domiciles within the LECs. And so that's your most basic form of representation, how you as a governing body for that airline speak through your governing body up to your MEC, which your reps are part of that MEC. Everybody should participate by attending an LEC meeting as best they can. I'm totally cognizant of the fact that we all have busy lives and that we have multiple busy schedules, differing schedules. But if you're able and you have the time, you should attend an LEC meeting, understand the issues that are being discussed at the local level at your LEC, know and introduce yourself to your reps. Having been in these positions multiple years is that your reps want to hear from you. They want to know who you are. They want to be on a first name basis with each and every one of you, whether it's in the terminal, whether it's at an LEC meeting. They want to hear from you so they understand your thought process and the issues that are important to you. And as a rep, understanding how people think. And the fact is like, we may not always see eye to eye on the issues, but we also have to understand the facts that surround those issues that support the decisions that are made. Whether we agree with the ultimate decision is, just dependent on the body, whether it has a majority support, but having that ability to communicate and hear the consideration and perspectives of all the members really helps the process better. So if we get into the basic structure of ALPA, it starts at the LEC level, which is the most basic form of governance in an airline. Then it goes up to the MEC. Within the MEC, for what we would call multi-council airlines, which are most airlines, you have multiple LECs within the MEC. Those LECs are also members of that MEC body, the governing body of the airline, making decisions on behalf of everybody at the airline. And each one of your reps participate in that MEC. You have an executive group on top of that, which is the master chairman, vice chairman, secretary treasurer or secretary and treasurer. Sometimes that position is divided up. The master chairman, when the MEC is not in session, and this is a very pertinent thing to remember, when the MEC is not in session, that master chairman is essentially the CEO of the day-to-day operation. They are implementing the will and the guidance of the MEC when they make decisions and pass resolutions, establish policies. They give the walking orders to the master chairman to resolve the issues that crop up on a daily basis, whether it be a FOQA issue, ASAP issue, scheduling issue. They're the ones who make decisions on what is the desire of the body, on where they want to take positions on these various issues. And so that master chairman is key to interfacing with the company, with the chief pilot's office, with everybody at the corporate level, communicating the desire of the airline, which is composed of the LECs, establishing policy and giving him direction. The vice chair is very much of a supportive role. Those positions do a multitude of different things at airlines. They could be specifically geared towards working on committee assignments, working directly with committee chairs, understanding what they're doing and reporting back to the MEC and to the master chairman on what's happening. The secretary treasurers, they are the fiduciaries along with the other officers of the MEC funds for that airline. And so they oversee and make sure that the expenditures at the MEC level comply with the policy manual and also the ALPA administrative manual and constitution and bylaws. And as a secretary, they take the minutes and manage all of the issues during the meeting with resolutions and keep everybody in compliance and really act as a parliamentarian, for lack of a better term, of the process at the meetings. And so that's the MEC level. There's also additional duties for the master chairman. They also are a member of what we call the executive board, which is a body comprised of all the master chairmen from all the ALPA airlines that meet twice a year, spring and fall, every year. And they really act as this governing body when the board of directors, which is the larger body composed of the LEC reps that meet every other year to establish policy changes. And they are the only body that can make constitutional changes to our governing body document. So that they have sole purview to make those changes. No other body does. And so those master chairmen will vote and change and amend the administrative manual, which really outlines how we do business within ALPA, whether it be strike funds, MCFs, every administrative process within ALPA. And then additionally that, Jade is a part of it. I'm a part of the executive council. The executive council is comprised of what we call Group A carriers. Group A carriers are carriers that have more than 4,000 pilots or $10 million of dues revenue that get their own individual EVP. Within that EVP group, we have B1, B2, and B3, which are comprised of EVPs from smaller carriers. We group them together so that we balance them all out. The simplest way to explain that is we take the carriers that aren't A carriers and we apply their dues income or size, really actually size, how many pilots are there, and we balance it out. We go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 based on size, and we make sure that the size of all the different B groups are equally the same. And they all have a vote around the table at the executive council. The executive council has the ability to interpret the Constitution and bylaws. What this allows them to do is if there's a constitutional question from an MEC, the executive council can issue an interpretation that allows the MEC to do something that isn't expressly thought of in the Constitution and bylaws, but is allowed by a process. They can issue an interpretation to allow an MEC to do something, and that's a question we can resolve. But their primary role is to act as a fiduciary. And, what does that mean? Essentially, we oversee that the spending that occurs at the MEC level, at the national level, is all in compliance with the Constitution, bylaws, and the administrative manual. So if you have an expenditure at an MEC that's over $20,000 for outside resources, all those issues have to be approved by the executive council. All MCF allocations come to the council first before they're approved by the executive board. A lot of our role at the executive council level deals with things that have to do with money. And so that's really the main driver of the executive council. And of course, the highest governing body, which is the board of directors, comprised of your LEC officers, who really, like we said, meet every 2 years, and they really establish the strategic plan for ALPA, what they want us, the national officers, and the rest of the governing bodies and volunteers at the national level to focus on to achieve the benefits for them. and they also vote and amend and change constitutional bylaw change suggestions that come to them for approval. So that's really ALPA structure in a nutshell. But I think we really have to go back that it's really, really super important for people to be involved at the LEC level, because that allows you to understand the issues that are out there. It allows you to really know who your reps are. And I think, although you may not 100% agree with your reps all the time, it's great to actually talk to another human being and understand how they think. And I think that really helps us draw down the defensive positions we take a lot of times. Like, I don't like that position. But it's like, when you know your rep and you know how they think, it really helps you communicate and find resolution to issues that come up. So with that, I'll kick it back to you.
Sean, I want to expand on two parts of that. Being that I've worked many different, including a rep, for a very short period before I took the officer role. Remember, as a rep and as a pilot, that relationship needs to be understood very well. The rep has to hear all the voices. It's easy to listen to the loudest voices. We all know the loudest voices in any group. It doesn't matter whether it's your personal friends or everything, they're always heard. But remember, all the pilots, you need to, not only as a pilot, as a member, make sure your voice is heard and that you're listening as the rep to the majority of the voices, right? It's easy to hear the loudest voices. It's hard to make sure you're understanding what does the majority really want in your pilot group. I think that is a key spot to carry the majority of the voice up, to make sure your officers understand. And being an officer, I need to know, is it 10% of the group, 5% of the group? Is it 50% of the group that has an issue, right? Sean, you've been there. You've been a master chair. You hear those loud voices. You get those phone calls from the loud voices, but is it the loud voice or is it the majority? And I think as not only an LEC and MEC, understanding who and what the issues are to the entire group, not the loud group, not the quiet group, but the majority of the group. Where do we truly stand? I think that's what makes an MEC successful, right? In understanding those pieces. The other piece that I want to kind of expand on, you did a great job expanding the one piece. I have a wonderful MEC vice chair. That vice chair role is, for me to be successful as an MEC chairman, that vice chair role is critical. That vice chair role on a daily process, helping set the direction of all the committees that the MEC, the LEC reps, tells the MEC body what wants to happen on a daily basis. Once that is set, that vice chair makes sure all the committees are following the strat plan, and we'll kind of get into that piece and shortly, but following what the process is set on a daily basis, running the committees, understanding, making sure they're staying, working with the Sec Treasurer on their budget and moving forward. That piece as a vice chair is critical. As MEC chairman, I can't micromanage every single committee. I just don't have the time. But my vice chair, that is their purpose, right? That purpose of the vice chair, hey, what is this committee doing? What is our comms committee doing? Where are we at on X? It doesn't matter. But that vice chair, that's his role, making sure that they're operating not only for what the voice is, but also operating for the resources. If we need more volunteers, I need to know, can we put it in a comm? Can we recruit more? What do we need to do to make sure we have the right people in place for every committee to be successful? Those are the only two things I'd like to expand from my point of view on your awesome kind of overview, 1,000-foot view.
The thing that we've been discussing a lot of is really pretty foundational around reps. A lot of conversation on that. So let's talk about scope of reps, especially as pilots look forward to elections. Let's talk about choosing a rep and understanding, or maybe even a pilot that wants to be a rep. What are they looking at adding to their workload, to their life? What do they need to be well versed in? What do they need to understand? And then how do they perform as a great rep within the MEC?
Wow. So I'll take a first stab at it. I know Jade's got some fill in for this one too, but look, a rep is a really it's a broad role within ALPA. When you think about it, you could be the chair or vice chair of your LEC. So you would have responsibilities at the local level to oversee what happens in your LEC. Most airlines, you're going to be dealing with pilot discipline issues or pilots who are in trouble in some way, shape, or form. So you're going to have a wide palette of issues that will come up that you'll have to deal with and help pilots navigate your collective bargaining rights. If in fact they find themselves in a predicament. Your primary role a lot of days is contractual questions will come up from pilots who are out there. Reserve questions are ripe all the time for people who are like, is this a valid assignment? I've been rescheduled, or maybe I have a payroll issue. I mean, you are really dealing with a wide palette of issues with pilots that have problems enforcing the collective bargaining agreement. On top of that, you have your quarterly LEC meetings with the other LEC officers, educating your pilots on the issues that are before your pilot group at the MEC level, the issues that you're focused on at the local level, maybe airport specific issues, domicile issues that are very specific and unique to your pilot group at that LEC, educating on the latest contractual issues that you're dealing with at the MEC level. And so I really think that as a rep, you're really dealing with a wide range of issues. And as you come into that role, if you've never done it before, it is a steep learning curve for anybody who comes in like, wow, there's a lot here, because not only are you a member of at least three governing bodies, the LEC, the MEC, and the BOD, that you are going to be actively participating at different frequencies throughout your term, which usually lasts 3 years, that you're going to be in a multitude of different situations, learning new things all the time. So you have to have a really open mind to learning new things, putting extra time into studying the Constitution, the bylaws, the administrative manual, and also a super deep dive into your contract and navigating your own committee structure in order to solve problems. So it is a really broad role within ALPA. And on top of that, you are really the representative of your MEC at the local level, dealing with pilots, knowing the pilots, understanding the issues, seeking information and clarity on what's happening in your local body. So you are the day-to-day representative of your pilot group at that local level. So it's a great role. You learn a lot of things that you would never learn as a pilot, and you get to know your company counterparts quite well, especially the chief pilot's office or whoever handles the pilot discipline issues at your airline. And it's a really rewarding role to help people out who find themselves in bad situations 9 times out of 10 through no fault of their own, and really helping them out and having a significant impact positively on your pilot group and your pilots. So Jade, I'll kick it over to you. I know you got a ton.
Yeah. So I think it's kind of a loaded question. What makes a good rep? I think it's the willingness to listen, right? A rep doesn't have to have all the information. It's understanding where to find the information or who to get somebody to that has the information. I think understanding the rep doesn't have to have the answer, and it's okay to say, I don't know, and let me find someone who does. And the person that's willing to have those conversations, to listen to the pilot group, to understand not the loudest, the majority, to meet them where they're at, meet the pilots where they're at, and then not only educate themselves, but also understand and educate the pilots on the why. Why is stuff happening? Why are we stalled? Why are we accelerating? Why are we going after X? Why didn't whatever the next hot topic's going to be? Why is Airbus wanting to go to single crew? We can have all these, but that education piece and understanding, you have to educate yourself, but you have to be willing to educate the pilot group and have some of those tough conversations on a two-way street. You have to be able to listen, you have to be able to educate. And I think doing that, and then not only taking that information, but what you're hearing, and now setting the MEC and bringing that information to the officers in your MEC meetings. So you're taking it from the LEC into the MEC and saying, hey, this is why my pilots feel X. Being able to have that two-way conversation both ways and making sure the unification of a pilot group is probably the strongest thing you'll ever have. And the way to be unified is to be educated, to have an education on a two-way street. And I think that information, that's probably the hardest thing we have as an entire ALPA group. I'm sure Sean would agree on that, is that education piece, right? And if we're educated, we're strong and we have a strong voice. I'll leave it at that, and we can expand as needed.
Yeah, and I'll dogpile a little bit on what Jade said there. And I think he really encapsulated what really makes a great rep is somebody who can listen effectively and somebody who can communicate what they just heard back to the person and explain to them what they need to hear. Not what they asked, but what they need to hear to understand the problem is, and be able to actively listen and be a great communicator and bring people along and tell them hard things that don't comport with what they want to hear, but do it in a way that understands, I just want you to understand my perspective or a larger perspective. And we don't get into an argument about it. We're actually learning from each other and being a great communicator. I think if you're not a great communicator when you start as a rep, you will be when you're done. So I think that's the key thing.
Yeah, the importance of open-ended questions, making sure that you are truly hearing what the person that's across from you is trying to tell you.
Exactly.
On this, you spoke earlier about how the MEC vice chair interacts with the committees. To what extent do reps interact or direct committees?
In general, we have a kind of a saying within ALPA to help people understand the role of the master chairman, the role of the LEC. When the MEC, comprised of the reps, are in session in a meeting, they are running the day-to-day operation at that point in time while they're in session. They are all there. They are making group decisions based on majority perspective, sometimes a super majority perspective, depending on the issue that they're tackling. So they are running the day-to-day operations at that point in time. When the MEC is not in session, those policies that they've created, the policy manual, ALPA policy, the strategic plan, those are the tools that are guiding the master chairman in making day-to-day decisions. Now, there are times when the master chairman is like, look, we've been given directive by the MEC. This falls outside of that directive, and it's good business and good practice for me to go back to them and not riff on this and really bring them together on a special meeting call or a Teams call or whatever the issue is, to say, hey, I've got an issue that I feel is outside of the guidance you've given me as a body, and I want your perspective. As far as individual reps guiding committees on a daily basis, they don't really individually have that capability. It's generally a group exercise, passing resolutions, passing policy that is the will of the body. But individual reps guiding committees on a daily basis, that just doesn't happen. It's outside the norm. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, so I would look at it as a highway, right? The reps set which highway we're going to get on. And we're going to continue through as many states as we need to based upon what the reps say. And once that's set and they're in session and they say, hey, this is the direction we're going, the committees are going to follow that direction and stay on the highway. If there's an exit or something odd and I need to take a right turn, maybe we need to call we can get on a meeting, and it doesn't have to be in person, and say, hey, this exit came up. Which direction do you want us to turn? And once that direction is set again, then again, through the vice chair, the vice chair is going to say, hey, make sure you stay on the direction, right? If you go left, you go right, the vice chair kind of brings them back in. The MEC chairman can make sure that that's happening. They're working as a team. I always look at it, the vice chair, the chairman, the sec treasurer, three-headed dragon, right? And they have to be working in conjunction all together. If they're all doing separate things and they're not talking, they're not having the conversations, then we're all on different highways. And then there's a bigger issue, right? So as long as we're on the highway in that direction set while we're in session, stay on the highway. Once you have to make a turn, come back in, reaffirm where we're going to go, and keep on those directions. As long as we're keeping going, then those are, I don't want to say they're autonomously, they're working as set by the direction that the MEC set while they're in session, with the oversight of now the MEC officers to make sure they're functioning properly and staying on and going in the right direction. If something pops up again, hey, I'm an LEC rep. Hey, why did this happen? I can ask the vice chair. Why did this happen? Hey, this is the direction you guys set. This is why we're on. If you want something different, let's come back in session. We'll set it at a different time. That's how I would see a normally functioning MEC to operate. Sean, you can expand. You've been a master chairman also. So I would say, and with as many airlines as we work, that's the normal process.
Yeah. And I think Jade kind of illustrates it pretty well there, is that you set these policies, the boundaries, these guide rails for what you're doing. When something falls outside of a planned or discussed or even a hypothetical that you thought you were going to encounter, you automatically get back to the body and say, hey guys, we've hit a point where this wasn't planned for, this wasn't as discussed. I need some future guidance and perspective from your pilots to me on where we want this issue to land or where we want to guide it. And once that new guidance is given, we move forward. So it's very much like a CRM exercise, right? Here's your job. Here's your description. When you see something occur outside of this, you need to ask questions. You need to get more information. You need to get more guidance. It's a fine role as a master chairman of understanding, like, yeah, I can tell you right now, my reps are going to have a real hard time with this if I don't get some feedback from them. So I'm going to reach out to them to make sure that they understand the totality of the issue or the questions being asked and the choices they have to make to give me guidance on what I need to go forward and try to pursue. Because it's just not going to be me, Sean Creed, making the decision. I need to bring you into the boat with me to make some tough decisions so that A, I have your input, and B, when you're asked by your pilots, you can explain the discussions and the decisions that were made. So
all really good. On the interactive level, day to day, as a captain, do I only speak to my captain rep, or can I go to my first officer rep as well? Do they oversee that entire body?
Yeah, it's pretty, I look at it this way. The captain FO is really representational, but if we go back to elections, when we elect these people, I mean, captains vote on FO reps, FOs vote on captain reps. So those people are still members of that body. If I'm an FO rep, I still represent everybody in that LEC, whether they're a captain or FO. Specifically, if they have issues, I deal specifically with FO issues. And sometimes I may have captains who call me and I'll deal with their issues as well too. But in general, captain FOs will deal with specific captains who call them, or first officers who call the first officer rep. But as a rep, I rep everybody in that LEC. I talk to everybody. If they call me with a problem, I'm going to say, I only deal with first officers. You're going to be like, hey, dude, what's your problem? Let's pull in your captain rep as well too, so he understands what's going on. It's a team effort. Even though you may be a captain or FO rep, it doesn't matter. We rep everybody in the LEC. They're all our people. And if you got a problem, it's my problem to deal with. So,
and most LECs also have a sec tresh, right? And so even with that, they're all available to, again, who has the answer. It may not be the captain, it may not be the first officer rep, it may not even be the sec tresh, but they all should understand where to get that answer for you. So again, working together collaboratively for a solution, right? Sometimes the captain may be in the air flying and you need a question answered pretty quick. The other two are there. They're all representatives. They're all elected. They all can provide that answer and help you find that answer.
Yeah, that's an excellent point. I think the secretary treasurer role kind of goes, it's not top of mind when they're thinking of who can help me out. It's always captain rep, FO rep, and they're just there for the budget, but they're there for quite a bit more, and they have a great understanding, and they're in the process as well.
Yeah.
Jade, you earlier were talking about a highway. I really like that analogy. We're currently in Section 6 negotiations here at Frontier. That is driven by the strategic plan that is decided upon by the MEC. That's the highway, correct?
Yeah, that's the highway that someone sets, right? When you're in session, you're setting that direction. That strat plan is the direction. That direction can be brought up from an LEC level. LECs can create a resolution, bring it to the MEC, right? So that a resolution could be the voice of a pilot. It could say, hey, this is what I'm seeing. We have a majority. We're going to vote on an LEC. Comes up, and that is setting the direction. Now, remember, the strat plan is a living document. It's not a document that's set in stone that you set aside. It's an interactive living document that you say, where are we at today? Where do we need to go tomorrow? How are we going to get there? Right? So that strat plan, we have a team that we can send out. It's called the GO team, the SPSC, SPC. They can come in and help you create some of those documents. But remember, the reps and the MEC, when they're in session, they should be updating that and setting that direction. Once that direction's set, you set the highway. Now we got to get everybody else in, right? So you think as a level, the MEC is setting the 20,000 foot level. The committees have to operate in the 3,000 foot level. So they're operating the hows, right? So once that's set, we're going to come up with a plan on the hows, and I'm going to divvy up, right? For me, I come from a business background. So how I do it, if I'm working something like a comms communication plan, right? I'm going to set up some type of project manager, whatever you want to call it, whatever you use, and give each committee their role. That role is now set by the strat plan. So, hey, once that is set and that project manager is going, those projects are now managed by the committees because they're interacting. It's already been approved. This is how we're going to get there. That's my highway. That's how I use it. That's how I operate within my own MEC. That's how when I'm helping MECs, that's how I would suggest they do that. Sean, jump in and you've set strat plans. You were running SPSC, SPC for a long time, getting these developed. What I've learned a lot through Sean and Ronan and some of the other people that are really doing it. Dana is another one that's well known that goes out and works with these. But that is how I see the document and how I use the document at my MEC and how I suggest it when I work with MECs.
Yeah. The strat plan is really critical. We started that back in 2008. There was always a strategic planning component at ALPA National, the higher level of the organization. But in 2008, it was brought into the BOD level. And then, subsequent to that, it was brought into a lot of the MECs. And the idea behind it is that it provides a clear roadmap that everybody in the room helps construct so that there is absolute clarity on the direction of the body, everybody within that body, where we started and where we are pointing the nose of the airplane. And along that way, everybody knows their role. Everybody knows what's expected for them to deliver to contribute to getting from point A to point B. And it really focuses, as like Jade said, project management. We're not going to sit over and argue, whose job it is, what the ultimate plan is. It's just like, this is my job today. This is what I'm expected to contribute to this whole totality of the process moving forward. And if there is some change that needs to be done, we come back to the body for direction, and we get that direction and we continue on. We are a juggernaut moving forward. And I think, this is where a lot of pilot governing bodies fall apart, where there's this tug pull, who's in charge, who does what, who's going to lead the way on this. It's like, no, we agree on a direction. We set it, we forget it, we do it. And when there's something, the next job that comes up, we do the same thing over again. We get into a habit of completion cycles, of getting things done and moving forward and making decisions. It's just like everything we do in the cockpit. I have my checklist. I have the things that I need to do. I have my flows. I'm going from point A to point B. Here's how I'm going to get there. If anything happens in between, everybody knows their job. Everybody knows the checklist to go to, and this is how we're going to do it. And so having that strat plan, that guidance, that direction, everybody knows the expectations for when a decision is to be made, the questions you're going to be asked, and the responses I'm going to expect from you for us to continue on. And so it really helps that out.
Yeah, Sean, I like that take, the checklist, right? Kind of analogy. It's the same thing. You don't need to be getting ready for takeoff thinking about the before starting checklist. And if you're getting ready to add power and all of a sudden you're going back to before start, what are we doing? And I think that's the key of that project manager, right? We need to be moving forward and setting the direction. If we keep going back to the start, you're never going to get anywhere, right? Setting that direction, following the direction, that's what makes you successful.
And really, it really helps the team, the body. A lot of times I've found out, when we come in and we have a strategic planning session and the body makes a decision, implements the plan, they see things happen, they begin to trust the process, and all the other issues that come in of the day-to-day control, who's controlling what, all falls away because it's like, it doesn't matter. It's yielding benefits for everybody. We just keep in this continual chain of making decisions. If something doesn't work, We make a change, the change works, we continue on, and we just keep solving problems day to day. We don't focus on, who's grabbing the yoke today. It's like we all got a job.
Right. Trust who has the job, right? If you have someone and you have a committee, allow them to try to put some work in. If you're always changing committee members, then you have to train and get them all spooled up. And then again, you're starting over. You're going back to the before start checklist, right? You put them in there for a reason. Trust them to do the work. Give them some time to show, grow, and experience, right? Keep them in those guide rails. Keep them on the highway, but allow them, right? Do people make mistakes? Absolutely. We all make mistakes. And if we can't sit here and say we're not going to make a mistake, we're pilots. Why do we have checklists? If we're perfect, we wouldn't have a checklist, right? I always tell people that. I'm an evaluator in the sim. I expect mistakes, right? That's the whole thing. I need to have a conversation. I expect that. I expect that as an MEC chairman. Let's keep them on the highway. That highway is a 6-lane highway. Perfect, right? We're going to bounce in between some of those rails. It's not always going to be perfect. We're in such a fluid environment. We don't know what's going to happen tomorrow, right? So you have to be flexible, right? The water coming out of the hose doesn't always go just straight. So you got to understand, we need to be able to see where that stream's going to lead us, that highway's going to lead us, and stay within those rails that you set for me. The committees have it set. The committees have their highways. Stay in it, right? Allow them to kind of bounce back and forth and adjust for whatever's happening today.
Jade, you said a few things that I want to expand on. I wasn't planning on going this direction, but it's when you talk about the dysfunction of doing a checklist wrong, it really highlights that ALPA National does have tools for MECs to utilize to help get through any dysfunction they may have. So you talk about National SPSC. One thing that's in that is SWOT analysis, right? How can a Go team assist in reining out dysfunction and getting everybody back on track, back on that highway, back on a strat plan, moving in the same unified direction?
Yeah, so I would say the first thing, again, it goes back to being honest, right? Being honest and taking a true self-evaluation of where we're at, right? Again, you can go back to the checklist analogy. Did we do the checklist? Well, does it matter? If you think we didn't, you don't know we did it, let's recomplete it. What's the harm in that, right? Let's have that discussion. Let's be honest, right? We may disagree, but why do we disagree? Understanding what the problems are will help you solve where you need to go. Having a true conversation, but then you got to, once you set that plan, you have to trust the process. The change won't happen overnight, right? So if you have a dysfunction, a lot of times what I see, the largest dysfunction that I see in MECs that are struggling is trust. Trusting the process, trusting the movement, trusting if I need to have a conversation and I need to sit down with my management and have lunch on an off the record conversation to figure out where I need to go and then bring it back, I need to be able to have that conversation. Some people don't trust me going alone. That's okay. But you may not like what's happening on the process, but you have to put your input and trust what the outcome's going to be. Once we make that highway, once we pave that road and we say this is the direction we're going to go, that's what the SWOT analysis does. What are our vulnerabilities? What are our problems? Where do we want to go? What's affecting us currently? And how are we going to make a change to get to where we want to go? Having that honest conversation and not being like, well, we don't know, we're not listening. Well, I don't want to bring it up because X is in the room. No, why can't we have the conversation? Where are we truly at? What are our true vulnerabilities? Being vulnerable and understanding where your vulnerabilities are as an MEC, as an LEC, as a ALPA National, we have to understand all of that. If you're not truly looking at where can we be harmed or where are we getting harmed, how are you ever going to get to the next spot, right? Again, business background coming from building. I did construction. I know Sean did construction. Setting the cornerstone, right? If you don't set your cornerstone, you're never going to be square. If you don't set that starting block and you truly get it perfect, you're never going to move forward. Everything will be off from that standpoint, right? Understanding where you're truly at. Every MEC meeting, you should understand where you're truly at. Negotiations aren't ever going to be the exact same. If I say day one is going to be exactly on day 150, I've never seen that happen. I can try to pretend, protect, project all of them. Day one, where we're going to end, it never happens, right? You can have a highway, you can have a guide. This is, I think, where it's going to go, but there's always going to be a turn somewhere, and being able to listen and understand where that's going to happen and being able to adjust on the fly with your group will make you successful. That's my perspective. Sean, I'll throw it to you.
Yeah, no, I agree with all that. I think the one important piece to this, especially if I was a rep, is that one of your main jobs communicating with your local members is bringing them along. And I think if we look back to any failed TAs that have occurred, one of the primary issues that arises is that when the TA was reached, there was generally a gap in information. And that gap could have been a lack of forthrightness with what happened in the TA or what was the ultimate result of the TA approval or how we arrived here. Or the pilot group just woke up one day and said, oh, we were headed to California and we ended up in frickin' Alaska. What the hell? They ended up in a place where they totally had no understanding of how they got there. And you, as a rep, understanding and being part of this process and the strategic planning process and the negotiations process is that you're able to communicate that back to your members as you bring them along. They need to be a part of that process as much as you can possibly be in a negotiation, and as much clarity and truthfulness you can have while you're involved in a very, deliberative process with a small group of people. But being able to bring your pilot groups along and explain how, every turn in the road and how you got there. And this is how you would do it is through, the strategic planning process, educating your members, bringing the issues up, and, as a rep, sitting there and having the credibility of articulating how you got from point A to point B and bringing everybody through every twist and turn in that process helps members understand, where you arrived at this ultimate solution. Collective bargaining agreement is generally where we see it the most, but I think it highlights that inability to really bring the pilot group along with you and bring your members along with you as much as you can. Strategic planning allows you to do that. It allows you to communicate, and they can see the grist mill working the problem and solving it and the issues that came up, and you're able to really thoughtfully talk to your members about that. And I think it's really important. And it really helps you as a body really understand how you solve problems and really tackle even greater and greater problems that come along with better outcomes and better speed.
In what ways has this process changed over the years, the SWOT analysis and how it's utilized? Because that's ultimately the Go team coming in and designing, helping the MEC design the highway map that the MEC creates. But to get there, it's sounding like a pretty painful process, very open, very direct process. But I'm sure over the years, you guys have made changes to it to help it happen quicker, help you get to the final end goal. And it's been refined to a better product, perhaps?
Yeah, classically, the way we had done it at the national level through the BOD was this very broad, multi-year plan that we would grind through as a body. And I think what we found out and what we've done more of is from the Go team is that we'll come in and we'll do a very quick assessment. We'll interview the MEC officers and other relevant experts at that body prior to coming in and saying, hey, give us the spirit of what's going on, issues, internal issues, so that we have really a good understanding of the problems and solutions they're looking to arrive at. And before we come in the door, we'll really have a really good idea of are we here to make a 3-month plan and we'll come back again, and that this will be a multi-step process assisting this body at ultimately getting to a highly functional place to solve some really complicated problems? Or are these people in a really good state? They just need a little bit of tweaking here and there in some specific areas. So I think we've really adapted the SWOT analysis to really adapt it to whatever the position on the ground that we need. So we'll focus on some very specific key areas that can really be high return to the body. And achieve the most buy-in from the largest portion of the group. And that's really kind of been the secret sauce, is to really change up, instead of just coming in and doing a one-size-fits-all solution of saying, we're going to create you a 1-year plan to get you through negotiations for this year. It's like, some people are not ready for that. Some people really need to focus on, like, hey, let's sit down and let's solve our issues for the next couple months, and then come back again. And then hopefully we'll be in a better spot as an organization to really expand on that and quickly build out over several steps a more broader plan to attack larger issues. And so I think we've adapted that now to really scale it to the requirements of the body, to be more responsive to the needs, to make sure that they have a high level of uptake on belief in the process of having the strategic planning process involved in everything that they do.
Yeah, so it isn't always a cross-country road trip. Sometimes it's more of a map to stick to the gas station before you run out of gas. Yeah.
Sometimes we're going to get nachos at 7-Eleven. I mean,
yeah, some taquitos. How does SIMDAR, the Strategic Member Development and Resources Program, how does that relate to all of this?
So generally, that's under Marie Schwartz. She's the head of SIMDAR. And so they are really, they are the people who usually receive the first call for a go team. And then from that, we'll sit down, with Ronan's group and Dana, who oversee it, and myself as well, and say, what sort of level of support do we need to curate for this group? What are the issues they're having? And then we'll really try to find specific experts in areas that they need help on, or they want to talk or solve the particular issues that they're experiencing. And then internally for us, we're like, of our basically group of people that we have on the committees, who would be the best people to go in there to really talk to these people without putting them on defensive, sharing their experiences from their airline, and really bring the conversation to a really good focused conclusion. And so we really try to be responsive on who would be the best people to bring in to talk to them, who would be the best subject matter experts to come in and help facilitate those conversations. And really, SIMDAR really helps us create that kind of curated go team for each airline. And so that's really their role, along with the committee, to really set the team up for whatever they need. Because what you may need now may be different than it's 6 months from now. It may be a completely different group, which is okay, because maybe you need to hear from a different group of people who have had similar experiences to what you may be experiencing now. Or it could be the same group of people. There may be enough of a nice relationship that develops, and the people who are there first off may be the appropriate people to carry you all the way through. So we really try to build that towards whatever we think would be appropriate for the body.
To be honest, this sounds like an expensive, intensive process. How is all this funded?
So that's all funded through the National SPC, which is a national committee, and they're the Strategic Planning Committee. That was the original committee that was developed back in the 90s to really handle the strategic planning at the ALPA national level, which didn't occur further down to MEC level. But they have always had that and owned that process. In addition to that, the Strategic Planning or Strike Preparedness Committee, SPSC, which was the old strike committee post 1985 strike with United, which were the strike contract people that came in at the last minute to, throw jabs and hooks at the company to try to get the contract process across the line. But what we found out is that both those committees have a lot of overlap, and we've tried to combine them both, but they still have some very distinct nuances that it's better to keep them separate. But we do cross-pollinate them quite a bit, because what we found is strategic planning is no longer end game. Strategic planning is something that is evergreen, that we're doing all the time, that it's a requirement to continually engage our members. And so we bring them along with this SPC to be a part of that process, to not only come up with solutions on how do we solve problems internally, but how do we communicate that externally to our members and have that create a nice life cycle of talking to our members and showing them what we do on a daily basis.
One of the things that we talked about earlier today that we're currently operating under here at Frontier is MCF. And I'd like a little insight into why is it only for specific committees? It's my understanding it's SPSC, P2P, family awareness. What's so important about those committees that they get this funding?
So if we look back to the MCF, which was originally called, the post 85 strike at United, and, the Eastern Airlines and Continental, that all happened after deregulation in the 80s. There was a need at the time because, ALPA almost went bankrupt supporting those efforts at those airlines. There was like a body that came together in a special BOD off cycle. And they said, hey, we've got to create a war chest of money for assisting airlines that are in extended, protracted negotiations that supports these efforts that can't be supported through dues income alone. There needs to be some external source. And so this war chest, as it was originally called, was created. And it was funded by bringing the dues rate from, I think at the time it was somewhere around 2% up to 2.5%. And the money that was generated from dues income from that 2.5% was put into the MCF. And that ended sometime in the mid 90s. And then it finally went down to like 1.95. And that war chest was created with those specific committees in mind, because those were the committees that were identified when this war chest was created as the significant drawers of money as we got into those protracted negotiations. And we go back into family awareness, which was really got its genesis from the 85 strike when Rick Dubinsky, who was a future master chairman at United Airlines, who was the strike chairman at United, his wife had made an offhand comment to him that this whole strike was going to be won by the kitchen table, not by pilots just talking to one another. And so that kind of flipped the light bulb off in his head is, family awareness. So family awareness came into play on that. Fast forward to now into the late 90s and 2000s, the war chest was renamed to the MCF. And recently, we made changes to allow greater access to those funds at different times. Generally, this is considered an end stage negotiations where you're just trying to get that contract over the hill. So it was really difficult to access those funds in order to use them. So we've created more outlets for MECs to have access to it. And additionally, we've created access to after the contract was ratified. Specifically, now we have what we call the MCF grant that comes in after the contract. What we found is that most MECs were just completely spending themselves into oblivion just to access the MCF money. And then we're almost getting a new contract, but we're effectively almost bankrupt because they'd spent so much money. So we said, hey, we're seeing now that there is a huge demand after the contract is ratified for having people work the issues that come up post-contract negotiations. So we created a grant for 3 full-time equivalents to pay a year's worth of flight pay loss at that airline. And so that would be used to subsidize the contract negotiation or the contract implementation after the contract was achieved. So we're trying to create more areas of access to it. Obviously, it's other people's money. So we want to be considerate of that and not encourage people just to spend like make it rain. But in the same token, we want people to have access to it when they need it. So that is really the thought process and genesis behind the MCF, and why we've limited it to those specific family awareness, P2P, and other SPSC activities, because those are really geared towards getting the contract across the goal line, bringing the pilot group with you, and pushing it over the edge. So
I look at it as a unification piece, right? When we get to those end stages, we need to unify the pilots. We need to educate the pilots to make sure they fully understand where we're at, to make sure they know where we're going to go. And then once it's done, how do we enforce the contract, right? That's that contract implementation. So not only did we get the contract, but how are we going to actually hold the company to the contract? That is where that extra support after the contract is signed came in, because they said, like Sean said, you can almost be bankrupt trying to actually get to this end stage and get the contract in. But now how am I going to enforce it? I need to enforce it and make sure I can hold those people. And you'll see your grievances go right through the roof after a contract. Everybody's trying to figure out, how does this actually work? How does the programming work? So making sure we're supporting you on the getting it to the across the goal, and then making sure that that goal is actually, you're going to be able to play in the stadium that you just received. So that's how I kind of see it and put it in general perspective.
Yeah, I was talking to the negotiating committee just the last couple of days. I did an airport sit with them, and they're kind of explaining the amount of effort that goes in after a contract signed to get it fully up to speed and implemented and switched on. It just sounded like a massive lift. So really appreciate that. And while I got both of you here, I got to plug a few people. I mean, when we're on this MCF and funding thing, we got to thank Wes Clapper for the work that he's done at ALPA National. The refunds that have been able to get kicked back to the pilots, how that's had effect on, we pay almost 2%, right around that number, but getting refunds back on that, driving it down close to 1.5%. That's really an incredible thing. And then within the executive vice president level, Alan Christie, one of our own pilots, your predecessor Jade, in the work you all have done as well to help support properties of our size get this funding and have the ability to drive forward towards getting the contract that we've earned here at Frontier. I really appreciate the work that all of you have done collectively. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Those flares get shot up from a lot of people, right? It's not done by one single person. It's a heavy lift by the entire group, right? And it starts with Jason Ambrosi, the president, all the way down. I think as a group, like I said, Sean's been my mentor. I've talked to Alan Christie at Frontier. Everybody's collaborating. We all want the same thing. We all want success, right? We're paying dues out of our own pocket, out of our own money. And it's sometimes good to understand where is it actually going, and that you have not only one person, but you have an entire team, not only your local people, but all these national people there to support you. And we're all working together to try to find some goal to make you successful.
Yep. So on the topic of dues, money, and spending, this is actually a really good segue because I wanted to talk about this. FPL comes up all the time, flight pay loss. Can we dive in a little bit on this? What is it for? How is it approved? How is it ensured that it's being tracked and budgeted for and that waste is limited? And how is it an asset to be utilized within a pilot group?
All right. So we'll go back to kind of, a little bit to how the earth curls. So we're in budget season right now at ALPA. And part of that artifact, once we do our budgets at national, is that we will fire off to the MEC at some point later, or probably later in the summer or early fall. We'll kick off a nice Excel spreadsheet that'll say, this is your approved allocation at the MEC level. Here's your budget for next year. The MEC, more than likely the Sec Trej, will do the grind and try to figure out the budgets and interface with all the committees and say, hey, what is your expected requirements for the following year? Here's what it was for this year. Let me know so I can explain to the reps who will be involved in approving this budget sometime in October, November for the subsequent year. So there is a robust process of working with every committee within the MEC, having to explain, how many volunteers you have, what monthly commitments you have to work, what's your planned workload throughout the year, any anticipated things that may come up. You will work through that whole process as an MEC. The Secretary Treasurer will sit down and will explain everything line item by line item within the MEC. FPL, at virtually every carrier except for Delta, because they have 24J, which specifically covers a lot of their MEC FPL expenses, but it's still part of the budgeting process, and they try to monitor it very closely. But given FPL is probably one of the largest expenses at every airline, it's probably close to 70% of the expense at most carriers. Now, once that budget has been done, flight pay loss is usually done. Most of us are pref bid, so it'll be done on a pre-block system so the approval will come through. It'll go through generally at the MEC level, will go through the Secretary Treasurer, who will be the fiduciary for that body. They will oversee it, and there will have to, understand what's the reason for this? Why are you doing this? They have the global oversight at the MEC level of why a particular member is asking for FPL. And they will track it according to their budget and say, this was planned. If it's unplanned, we'll ask more questions of why are you taking this? What's the reasoning behind it? So it's not like it's just individuals will set their FPL out there and then just burn it and go away. There's several checks along the way. If it is for a national level, it will come to either me or Wes or one of the other national officers, and then go to a committee level approval process before it comes to the MEC secretary treasurer to finally approve. So there's multiple steps where there's a check and balance on the reasoning behind this FPL request.
Yeah,
So
I'll
ahead,
add
Jay.
on. I'll add on to that. I've been a sec treasurer, right? That's where I came into my officer level. And every sec treasurer, the LEC sec treasurer, everybody has oversight. There is a very much transparency level on FPL on all expenditures. All of them can log into Tableau, and they can see who spent what on whether what mill you bought, the receipts, everything has to be provided. It's a very transparent system. There's no way to hide FPL. There's no way to hide expenditures because we are a nonprofit organization. We have to report all that, not only locally, but nationally. And the federal government watches us. So that process is very transparent. Everybody that has access to Tableau can look at the budget. So all your sec treasurers, if there's a question, they can pull it up. They can get in Tableau. You're on a comms committee. I can look up and see exactly. Not only that, National says, hey, all that FPL has to be posted also. There's a place where you post it. You can look at it. It's a very transparent system. There's no way to hide any type of information, any type of money. It has to be tracked down to the penny. I've missed on my own expense report 1 cent off, and it gets kicked back, being 1 cent off. If I overspend and I tip someone too much, guess what? It gets kicked back. I own it, right? All that to the penny is tracked. Wes, their team, Beth at National, they track all of that very, very closely from FPL to any expenditures that you're making. If you're getting out of line, you get an oversight. You get someone that comes in and goes, hey, you're not spending the right amount of money. You're spending too much money. And then you'll have a National will put somebody to kind of talk to you and figure out a plan to get you on a better route. So it's a very, very transparent system. There's training a couple times a year. If you want to go, any of the sec treasurers from the LEC level to the national level could go in and understand that process. So everybody's on the same page. So if you have a question, turn to your sec treasurers, ask them. They can produce all that information. There's no way to hide it.
Sean, before we did this, we met obviously to discuss topics for what we talk about today. And you mentioned that FPL is for the volunteer who's overly involved. That's a statement you made. And I like that, but I don't think it's just that person, right? Can we kind of talk about how, what the features around FPL are so that a volunteer doesn't go without, but they also don't get overly compensated? Walk that line, that threshold of how this, I would venture to say it's more of like a payback than a compensation. How does this work?
Yeah, I mean, I think, we have to understand that, generally a lot of our volunteers exist across the spectrum, whether they could be in the top 3% of the pilot group, or they're in the, the bottom 30%. And so the variability of them to fluctuate their schedule and manage it so that they can volunteer, exists on a spectrum of, some people have a great ability to do it. Some people have no ability. And so what we really want to do is make sure that we have FPL available to, like, say I'm a guy who's on reserve, and, depending on what your min days are, if it's 12 or 13 days, if you're a reserve guy, is that if that person or gal is, in there volunteering 5 or 6 days a month, and they're already at 12 to 13 days off, I think it's unreasonable to expect, that person to continue participating at that level, donating his or her time, which as a volunteer, you're doing that, but that's an over expectation to continue that to exist in perpetuity. And so having that ability to say, okay, hey man, you've been in here 2 or 3 months back to back, burning the candle at both ends, and his wife's about ready to throw his stuff out on the lawn. His kids have given up on him. And so he needs 3 or 4 days to go decompress before his head explodes. That, that is a proper use of FPL, because we want that person to continue as a volunteer. And so, having the ability to award FPL to people who spend an extensive amount of their personal time while they're not working is a valid use of flight pay loss. it's, the common term you'll hear is, people should not suffer for volunteering. And I think that is really something that we really have to, put out there, is that, if you have people and, like Chelsea, I know yourself too, are you're going to go out and do a trip after this. Okay. I mean, so it's like, that's
Only 3 legs.
Yeah, I only 3 legs. Yeah. But this is typical of, like, I mean, half the time I have volunteers who are like on conference calls and they're, 3 a.m. in Hong Kong, in a layover. I'm like, we all can't do this all the time. I mean, we're not all built to be type A personalities, to be continually working all the time. So we need to offer FPL, because I can believe you, if somebody is a really true hardcore volunteer, it would be pretty easy for them to say, you know what, I'm not going to participate and I'm just going to go fly the line and enjoy my life. So we have to offer FPL to people in order to, make up for that value added that they bring to their participation, or they'll just burn out.
Yeah. I think it goes back to basic. You should do no better, but you should do no harm. Right? FPL shouldn't make you better than anybody else on the line, but you shouldn't be harming a person for volunteering. Right? If that we have great volunteers, and if we don't provide them some of those time, they are going to burn out and they're going to say, I'm done. Right? And you want to be able to keep those volunteers around. You want to be able to, again, this goes back to the initial budgeting process. What are your expenditures going to be? What are we doing? Right? And this, again, strat plan. This is where it all ties back in. Understanding what you need to get to where you're going to go. And if you don't fund it and give the people the FPL, you're going to lose the volunteers you need to get across the line. FPL is to help make sure that you have the people when you need them, where you need them, to make sure the job can get done. We have to get the job done. We have to have good volunteers to get the job done. FPL is to make sure that we can provide the sources and the resources to our MEC, to our committees, to make sure the job gets done. You can't put more minutes in the day. People have to sleep. And you have to make sure you have the people in the right place to actually, we're sitting here on a podcast, right? How are we going to get that done? That we can't add minutes to the day to make it happen. We have to make sure we have the people and the resources to get it done. Some of us are crazy, like me. I'm sitting in a car, right, making sure we're recording this, right? But
Jade is sitting in his car, mind you, while his wife is inside the hospital getting cancer treatment done. And I would venture to say that this is not a overly extreme situation for a lot of the union work. Like, we're doing this stuff all the time. The beautiful thing about being an airline pilot is you get to leave the work behind when you go home. We give up that ability to leave the work at the airport while doing a lot of this work, especially in Section 6 negotiations. It really, for many people, it becomes close to a full-time job doing it. And it may be there's certain individuals within the MEC. You think of like negotiating committee. If you're involved in a merger, obviously the merger committee, MEC chairman, there's positions that it is full-time, nonstop. And what's the expectation for FPL usage in situations like that?
Yeah, I mean, people like that. I mean, having done master chair for 4 years and only being on full-time FPL 4 times during that whole 4 years, is that it's insane when I look back at it. I had, a 3-year-old and a 6-year-old, and had 13 days off a month and was a commuter. And it was just like, geez, it was like, it's insane that you would do that without, having the ability of having full-time FPL, because I can guarantee you that the vast majority of these positions have no, open close sign. It's 24/7, 365. Every Friday, promptly at 5 o'clock, the disaster begins. They carry you through the weekend. And
such a good way to put it. Oh man. Comms, it's just so, it is 10 o'clock at night, 11 o'clock at night. Hey, we got to get this comm out immediately. And then the entire approval process and all the people you got to connect to it. I am insulated from a lot of it, but like Chelsea Kennedy, our chair, she's got to pull her hair out all the time for these just extreme pop-up crazy things that got to do it right now. and then you layer in flying on top of it. It's like, holy cow. But yeah, the weekends, the Friday night. Yes. The rolling disaster through the weekend. Excellent point.
No, and it believe me, it would be a sheer pleasure to just fly the line and go home and be able to be capable of not caring, right? Uh, um, and disconnect that way, but it just can't. It's 24/7, 365. And, you know, it's an amazing commitment. And there's a lot of amazing volunteers out there that probably do not take the amount of FPL they should take. I mean, I really want to put that out there, that there's a lot of people out there who don't take the time away that they should. And unfortunately they burn out. And
Support your people. Support your people. If you don't support with the FPL, you're going to lose your good people, period. They burn out. That as a secretary, as a MEC chairman, there's more than one time that I've told people, you are taking some time, period. I'm not going to let you burn out. In supporting them in that way and having the MEC to say, hey, we have to support our people. If not, we're going to lose them. And do you want to start over training everybody to get them back up to speed? Support your people. I know it's tough. I know it hits the budget, but if not, trust me, it's much cheaper than training someone brand new on that subject and getting them up to speed. It will be 100 times cheaper. Support your people.
Yeah. I mean, Chelsea worked through her entire maternity leave.
I know. I talked to her.
Like stepping in and spooling up an entire comms committee while on maternity leave. And I don't know if you guys know, I'm going to say it and she can cut it out of this if she doesn't want in here, but she's pregnant again. So more maternity leave volunteering out of that one. I'm sure of it. So
Chelsea's a monster. I mean,
yeah, she is. Yeah, absolutely. That's good. That was a really good discussion. I really appreciate it. It's one of those topics that I feel like ALPA doesn't address enough, or they don't want to. You got to kind of tiptoe around it, but it's important, and it's what gets the ball down the field. And we have to have an understanding of it and respect for it, and treat it, in a non-wasteful way. And I think you said it best, where most people don't take enough. And honestly, I wish we could bolster the budgets of all the committees, the reps of everybody, so that they have more of this, so everybody can do their job better. And really, to me, that's what FPL does. It allows people to carve out that time that they need to do the work and move their pilot group forward. So thank you for that discussion.
Yeah.
Really, I think we discussed everything, guys. I'm looking at the list right now in front of me. We've run through a lot. I've got a few notes here on developing, creating leverage in and out of cycles, utilizing family awareness, and I think you did an excellent job of going beyond the questions that I even have. So at this point, I don't think there's anything else we really need to discuss. I've got to get dressed and get going to my day job. So thank you both for coming on the 5x5 podcast, talking to the pilots of Frontier Airlines. I simply want to close out by saying we do need volunteers. P2P needs volunteers. SPSC needs volunteers. I spent the last 2 days in Denver doing an airport sit because we just don't have enough SPSC volunteers in Denver. Please send a dart, or we say throw a dart, and reach out to SPSC, reach out to P2P, reach out to your reps, ask how you can be involved, and get involved in the process. There's been structural changes within SPSC to help it function better, to provide better family awareness events, to provide better everything to our membership here at Frontier, and it needs people to function. And it needs people to help alleviate the load that is on the chair, Vincent, and the people that are doing too much work right now. We need to be able to spread that down to the volunteer group and really develop leadership from within the committee to take those jobs in the future. So that's all I've got, guys. Have a great day. Thank you for sitting down with me, and thank you for everything you do up and above the Frontier Pilot Group.
Anytime. Thank you.
We're always here.